Welcome to the execution part of preprocessor directive. In the previous slides, I have explained you regarding the purpose and the description of preprocessor directives that we can use in our program according to the purpose. Okay, now in this section, I am going to explain you the use of these preprocessor directives with the help of the program. Now, very first program is related to the macros. Okay, so I'm going to come in here a macro. For this, we are using a preprocessor directive called hash define. Now, we know that this is also a kind of preprocessor directive called hash include that instruct the compiler to include these following header files called standard input output, and I'm also including console input output. Okay, so with this preprocessor directive called hash include, it instruct to the compiler to include these following two header files in our program. Okay, now I'm here defining a macro with the name called pi. Now, why we are using macro? As the definition of macro, it says that whenever we need to define some sort of values or some sort of a variable to be constant for the overall the execution during the overall execution of program, so we can define it as we can say as a macro. So whenever that the name of this variable comes in our program, that macro will expand and it replaces by itself by its corresponding value. So just for example, the value of pi to be constant for the during the entire execution of program, so we can say these kind of values we can keep it as a macro. So I'm taking here hash define to be a macro. Okay, now I'm again defining another macro. We can also pass values or the arguments with the macro. So you can say a comma b, these are two arguments that we are passing to the macro called max, and through this I'm actually comparing the making a comparison between these two. Okay, now first we need to clean that screen. Integer x, I'm taking integer x and the other variable named as r and area of circle. Okay, now again we can take another variable with the name called perimeter of circle. Now you can see enter radius of circle defined as scanf after this we can take the value from the user of radius, then we can calculate value of area of circle through the formula called pi r square. Okay, and the parameter of circle with the formula called 2 pi r. Okay, now area of circle then area of perimeter of circle okay. Now the x taken a variable above as integer x. Now I am using that variable to take the value which is maximum between these two, called just I am passing the constant values here like 10, 20. So what will be the maximum value? It was calculated through this macro in which we are passing these two arguments. So in this example we can see we can assign any value to the macro, or we can also pass the arguments. Okay, and then on the basis of these arguments we can take any decision. Now x maximum value to be x get ch. Okay, to hold that screen, then return. Okay, so this is our program. So the execution of this program, you can see there is no error. Okay, so I'm executing it. Radius, just for example, I'm giving here 2.5. Okay, then the area of circle is this, and parameter of circle is 15.7, and the maximum value between 10 and 20 is 20. So the purpose of this program is not to calculate the area of circle, but to understand what is the use of this macro called hash define, and which is having the name called pi, and its constant value that you have assigned here is 3.14, and whenever we need to use that value, we just need to specify the name of that macro you can see here in this expression pi r square and then 2 pi r. So wherever in our program, whether it is 1,000 line of codes, whenever we are using a pi, so it will replace that pi by 3.14. okay. And there is no procedure to change this value throughout this program by using functions or any other uh, uh, kind of methodology, which we can change or reassign the value to the macro by using undefined. Okay, which is also a kind of preprocessor directive. So or we can also pass the arguments to the macro. So with this example we can understand through the macro. Now we can also assign the type of integer values. We can also assign the character, or we can also assign this string to the macro. Okay, so we can assign any kind of value to a macro. Now in the next example I'm trying to explain you. Okay, in this example let's we have defined another macro which is named as called a letter. Okay, which is having a value a, we can also assign an integer value. Okay, you can see here integer value we have already used here in max. Now we can also use this. I'm taking a variable name, macro name called name, and assigning here any name called like Google. Okay, now I'm printing these values here just to understand whether we can assign any type of value, whether it is an integer value, floating point value, or it may be a character. Okay, so for the understanding purpose, just writing here value of letter, which is value of name it's actually a string. So you can see there's no error. Now circle, area of circle 5.2, area of circle is this, perimeter of circle, value of letter is a, that we have assigned to the letter variable macro, and then value of name called Google. Maximum value is between 10 and 20 is 20. So you can see we have so many macros here in this program, and we are assigning different types of values. Okay, this is the floating point value, this is the character value. We can assign a string, we can assign integer, we can pass the arguments also to the macro. So through this single example or this program, we can understand how we can define a macro. Now in the another example, I'm going to explain you the use of functional compilation, or we can say the conditional compilation of preprocessor directives. So for this, a new program now. I'm defining a macro, just for example, currency rate. Okay, now the currency rate, the value of currency rate is 80 into main. Now in this program I'm explaining you about the conditional compilation through hash if define comma hash else and hash and if. Okay, now again I'm clearing the previous screen of console. Then I'm declaring a variable name called dollar. Okay, then printf enter currency in dollar scanf percentage d just this variable called dollar. Then we are using hash if define currency rate, so it enters and we are just printing the value Indian currency as comma currency rate multiplied by the value of dollar. Okay, so this is the simple program which we are trying to understand. Otherwise we can say currency rate not defined. Okay, so and then at the end we need to end this conditional compilation of if defined and if we must need to write this directive called endif whenever we are using if define or if not defined or any kind of conditional compilation directive. Now the next statement is just winding up this program and then holding that screen after the execution. So this is the program. Now I'm explaining you this program. Here I am using a macro called currency rate, sorry. Currency rate is having a value called 80. That means the rate of currency to convert it from dollar to Indian currency. So just for example, I'm taking here 80. Now taking the value of a dollar and assigning it in a variable. Then here we're using if defined currency rate. That means if the value of any we can say any macro is defined, or we need to check, so it returns true. So in that case, if this value is defined, the current rate is currency rate is defined, so it will calculate the value of Indian currency. Otherwise it will generate a message, okay, currency rate not defined, and then we can finish it here with the help of hash and if. I'm executing this program, there is no error, okay. Now dollar is 50, so you can say 80 into 50 is 4000, okay. So this is the simplest program. Through this we can understand the use of hash if define. Similarly, we can also use hash if not define, okay. So in hash if not define, it is a simple program where we can just need to I'm commenting this section of macro, and then again I'm checking here. Now I'm checking on the basis of if not defined, if NDEF, that means if not defined currency rate. If this condition is true, if the value of this macro is not defined, we can uh, define the value of this macro called currency rate as, just for example, 80, okay. Now I have defined this value, okay, and then else part, and then define. After defining, I am again calculating the value, and then currency rate. If this condition is false, so we can say currency rate is already defined, okay. So if not defined case, what it says, if currency rate is not defined, so the condition is true, it returns true, then we can say we can execute those statements in between that if not defined. So it is just opposite to the defined, if defined, okay. So I'm executing this statement, currency in dollar, again I'm here, is 100 and the value of 80 into 100 is 8000, okay. Now so this is what we called hash if not defined, okay. Then the next program is about the hash if else, okay. So in the next program, sorry, now I'm defining here the value of x hash define, I'm taking a macro name called x and defining its value as 10. Then int mains, I'm writing a simple program to understand what is the purpose of using the macro named hash if, okay, comma hash else, and finally it ended up with and if. Now, so how hash if works? Hash if we can compare the values here. We can apply a condition here, x mod 2 is equals to 0. That means we can say number is even. Okay, hash else print number is odd, and then we need to finish it here with the end if. Okay, now, so in this program you can see I'm defining a macro with the name x and the value is 10. Now we can also apply the if else condition or the control structure over the macro, also the value of macro also. But remember one thing, we can only compare, or we can apply the value for macro. We can compare the value of this macro with the constant values only. We cannot compare it with the any variable. Okay, so remember this thing. Then if x mod 2 is equals to 0, the number is even, else the number is odd. So it is a simple program to understand the use of this conditional compilation directive called if hash if, hash else, and hash and if. I'm executing this program, the number is even. Obviously again I'm changing the value here of this macro like 13. So in that case okay, there is an error, number is odd, print should have a prototype print. Okay, now printf number is odd. Okay, so this is the simple program to regarding hash if, hash else. So this is all about the conditional compilation. Okay, so we were already discussed about the macros, we have discussed about the conditional compilation, and then the miscellaneous, we can say, preprocessor directives called undefined and pragma. Okay, so now in the next program we take a look over the undefined hash undefined. Okay, so hash undefined, how it works, hash define, where I'm taking a variable x which is having a current value called 10. Then in the main function, okay, printf first value of x is this. Okay, then I am undefining the value of this macro called x, and then in the next statement hash define x with 100. Okay, so now we can check whether the value is updated or not. Updated value of x after undefined. Okay, then x. So with this example, you can see I'm assign value 10 to this macro called x, and then if we need to reassign the value of a macro, or we need to change or we need to undefine the value of a macro, so we can use this directive called undefined. Through this, what actually it does with the macro x or the macro, it replace or it removes the value relevant to the given macro, and then we can reassign a new value to the previous name of macro. Okay, so now I'm executing this program here. So first value of x is 10, and you can see updated value of x after undefined is 100. Okay, for clearance, then change the line again. You can see first the value of x is 10. Here it prints the value of x as 10. Then we undefined and the value of x, then reassign the value as 100, so it will print 100 in the next statement. Okay, now you can see first value of x is 10 and the updated value of x after undefined is 100. Okay, so this is the simplest program to understand what hash undefined or the use of hash undefined. Okay, then the next is next program is all about the pragma, another kind of miscellaneous, we can say, the directive. Okay, so for this again have a new I'm defining here two of the functions before I'm actually declaring these functions after. Okay, then pragma startup. This is one of the directive of pragma, and I'm attaching it with before, that function name called before, and the another one is exit, and I'm attaching it with after, the function name called after. So simple program to understand. Okay, print this is inside main function. Okay, and it will return 0. Now I'm also making this statement as comment. Now I'm defining these two functions as void before which is actually print before main function. Okay, wait for it. And then void after printf function after main function. Okay, so actually you can see in the main function I'm not calling these two functions, but I'm attaching or defining here these two functions with a startup and exit. So you can understand uh, what is the purpose of startup and exit. Now startup, that means before the execution of main function, if we have attached any kind of function with the startup, so it will execute that function first, and then the execution of main function will start. And then similarly exit before the completion of program, just before the completion of program and after the execution of main program, it will execute that particular function which is attached to the exit directive. So startup before the execution of main program, and exit just after the execution of main program, and just before the completion of the whole program execution. Okay, so you can see I'm not calling these function in the main function. I'm just printing a simple message called inside main function, then before the main function, and then after the main function. Okay, now I'm executing this program. This program is all about the pragma. Okay, hash pragma. Okay, unknown preprocessor directive. I have written that the name of include as. Okay, you can see here before main function. Okay, then inside the main function. Okay, and then after the main function. So you can see here before main function, inside main function, and after main function. These three functions called as per we can say the list, or as per the startup, and then main function execution and exit. So whenever we need to initialize some sort of values before the execution of main function, so we can define that function, or we can attach that function with the startup, and then after the execution of main function, if we need to execute any other function, so we can attach it with the exit. Okay, so that's all for now. Thank you.